The auditorium lights were too bright. That was my first thought as I clutched the program in my hands, the paper crumpling under my nervous grip. Around me, hundreds of people buzzed with excitement, their chatter blending into a meaningless hum. I smoothed my dress for the 10th time. The emerald green one Mom had told me brought out my eyes, though she hadn't actually looked at me when she said it. Not really. Not like she looked at her Isabella, my twin sister, the golden child. The screen at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying the university crest as the dean stepped up to the podium. Today, we honor not just academic excellence, but the values this institution holds dear, he intoned. I barely heard him. My eyes were locked on the 3rd row, where Mom and Dad sat, their postures perfect, their attention unwavering as Isabella, resplendent in her cap and gown, beamed. Up at them from the front. I should have been up there too. The scholarship had been ours. The research project, the late nights in the lab, the breakthrough that had earned us both a spot in the chancellor's list. It had been mine as much as hers. But somewhere between the submission and the announcement, my name had vanished. Like I'd never contributed at all. The dean cleared his throat. And now our valedictorian, Isabella Laurent, will say a few words. The applause was deafening. Isabella floated to the stage, her smile radiant, her confidence effortless. She adjusted the mic, and for a fleeting second, her gaze flickered, to me in the crowd. Something unreadable passed over her face. Then it was gone. I stand here today because of the unwavering support of my family, she began, her voice carrying through the speakers. My real family. A murmur rippled through the audience. My breath caught. Behind her, the screen changed. A family photo. Except it was wrong. There was Dad, dignified in his tailored suit. Mom, elegant as ever in pearls. Isabella, glowing between them. And where I should have been, standing at Mom's side like I had in the original photo. Empty space. They'd erased me. The gasps around me were sharp, immediate. A few heads turned my way, curiosity and pity warring in their expressions. My face burned, my chest ached, but worse was the way Mom and Dad didn't even flinch, like they'd expected this, like they'd planned it. The program slipped from my fingers. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Isabella's voice faltered for the first time, her eyes widening as she realized what I was about to do. But I didn't run, I walked. Out of the auditorium, out of their lives, out of the lie I'd been living for 22 years. The sunlight outside was blinding. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking too badly to dial. A notification popped up, an email from an unknown sender. Subject: You deserve the truth. Attached was a single PDF, a birth certificate, not mine. At least, not the one I'd seen before. This one had a different name, a different birth date, and in the corner, stamped in faded red ink, property of Kettering Laboratories. Subject: S-147. The ground tilted beneath me. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just neglect. This was something darker. Something calculated. And as the pieces began clicking together in my mind, the strange medical checkups I'd had as a child, the way Mom had always been a little too cold, the way Dad had looked at me sometimes like I was a problem to solve, I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was their experiment, and I was done being silent. The coffee shop was too loud, too bright, too normal for the storm raging inside me. I hunched over my laptop in the corner booth. The birth certificate, subject S-147 Ord, spread out next to a cooling Americano. My hands hadn't stopped shaking since I'd opened that email. Every time I blinked, I saw that damn family photo projected on the auditorium screen, the empty space where I should have been. The USB drive the stranger had slipped me burned a hole in my pocket. I'd tried 3 different computers before finding one that could open the encrypted files, an old laptop at the university library that wouldn't be traced back to me. What I found made my stomach twist. Medical reports. Dozens of them. All with my name. All marked confidential, Kettering trial. The earliest was dated 2 days after my birth. Subject displays accelerated neural development. Recommend increased monitoring. I scrolled further. Age 4. Subject's emotional attachment to handlers remains below expected thresholds. Suggest controlled deprivation protocol to test resilience. A cold sweat broke across my skin. Handlers, not parents. Deprivation protocol, not parenting. The coffee turned to acid in my throat. All those times, Mom had forgotten to pick me up from school, leaving me waiting for hours in the office. The way Dad would disappear for weeks on business trips, right after my birthdays. The Christmas when Isabella got a pony and I got a notebook. For documenting your moods, sweetheart. The doctors said it's important. I'd thought they were just shitty parents. They were following a script. The bell above the door jingled. I slammed the laptop shut just as a shadow fell across my table. Sophia. Isabella stood there, still in her graduation dress, her makeup smudged under red-rimmed eyes. She looked nothing like the golden girl from the podium. I braced for her anger, her gloating. Instead, her voice cracked. You weren't supposed to find out like this. My laugh was jagged. When was I supposed to find out? When they shipped me back to the lab, she flinched. That told me everything. That told me. They're coming for you, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. Dad's lawyers. They've already frozen your trust fund. I don't care about the money. You should. She slid an envelope across the table. There's a flight to Geneva. Tonight. Paid in cash. Dr. Kettering lives there. He'll tell you everything. I stared at the ticket. Why are you helping me? For the first time in our lives, Isabella looked at me with something like guilt. Because I knew. Her nails dug into her palms. About the trial, about what you are, and I let them do it. The admission hung between us, poisonous and raw. Outside, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Isabella's breath hitched. They're here. Go. I grabbed the envelope, my fingers brushing hers. The first time we'd touched in years. Her hand was ice cold. Was any of it real? I asked hoarsely. Were we ever sisters? The sedan's door opened. A man in a suit stepped out, Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Run. The private jet was too quiet. I sat in the plush leather seat, staring at the envelope Isabella had shoved into my hands. The flight attendant, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze, hadn't spoken a word since takeoff. She just watched me, like I was a specimen under glass. I tightened my grip on the USB drive. The files had revealed enough to make my skin crawl, but not enough to answer the burning question, what the hell am I? The plane lurched, and my stomach lurched with it, not from turbulence, from the memory of Isabella's face as she told me to run, the way her voice had cracked. I let them do it. Had she known from the beginning? Had she enjoyed it? I pulled out the birth certificate again, tracing the faded stamp with my thumb. Property of Kettering Laboratories. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't place it. A quick search on the plane's Wi-Fi, which suspiciously wasn't restricted, brought up nothing but a defunct website for a biotech firm shut down in the early 2000s. Due to ethical violations. Ethical violations. I swallowed hard. The flight attendant finally spoke as we began our descent. Dr. Kettering will meet you at the hangar. I stiffened. How does he know I'm coming? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. He's been expecting you. Geneva was rain-slick and gleaming. the kind of city that hid its secrets behind polished windows and immaculate streets. The car that picked me up was black, unmarked, and smelled like antiseptic. Dr. Kettering wasn't what I'd imagined. I'd pictured a gaunt, white-coated scientist, a Frankenstein with a god complex. The man waiting for me in the dimly lit hangar was broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a smile that might have been warm, if not for the way his eyes lingered on my hands, like he was counting my fingers. Sophia. He extended a hand. Or should I say, subject S-147? I didn't take it. Start talking. His smile faded. You were born in a lab. The words hit like a slap. Not born, he corrected, reading my expression. Created. A prototype. Prototype. The hangar walls seemed to close in around me. Kettering gestured to a chair. I didn't sit. The Lawrence weren't your parents, he continued. They were investors. Isabella was their biological daughter. You were our gift to them, a child tailored to her exact genetic profile but enhanced. Enhanced. My voice sounded hollow. Stronger neural pathways, faster cognitive processing, and theoretically, no emotional distractions. His gaze flickered. That part didn't take. The room spun. I wasn't just an experiment. I was a failed one. Kettering sighed. The Lawrence were supposed to raise you under controlled conditions, monitor your development, but they grew attached, especially Isabella. A bitter laugh escaped me. Attached? She hated me. No. He pulled a file from his briefcase. She protected you. The file was labeled Termination Protocol, S-147. Inside, a single sentence was highlighted in red. Subject displays unacceptable emotional variance. Recommend immediate decommission. Dated 6 years ago, the day Isabella had accidentally spilled hydrochloric acid on the lab's main server. The day all my records had supposedly been destroyed. Kettering's voice softened. She bought you time. But now that you know the truth, the board has reactivated your case. My blood turned to ice. What does that mean? Outside, tires screeched. Kettering's head snapped toward the sound. His face paled. They're here. Who? The first gunshot shattered the hangar window. Kettering shoved me behind a crate as armed men in black tactical gear stormed the building. Listen carefully, he hissed, pressing a keycard into my hand. There's a safe house in Montreux. Go there. Find Dr. Chen, she'll explain everything. Another gunshot. Closer this time. What about you? I demanded. His jaw tightened. I made you. That makes me your greatest liability. Before I could react, he stood, hands raised, and stepped into the open. Gentlemen, he called, voice steady. Let's discuss this like... The gunshot echoed. Kettering dropped. I didn't wait to see if he was dead. I ran, through the back exit, into the rain. The keycard burned in my palm. Somewhere behind me, a voice barked into a radio. Subject is fleeing. Authorization to terminate. A second voice answered. When I knew, my father's confirmed. Rain fell in sheets as I stumbled through Geneva's deserted streets, each step sending shockwaves of pain through my injured leg. Kettering's blood still stained my hands, dried now, flaking off in rust-colored patches when I clenched my fists. The keycard he'd given me dug into my palm, its embossed letters forming a tangible reminder. Montreux. Safe house. Dr. Chen. I'd been running for 3 hours. 3 hours since the gunshot echoed through the hangar. 3 hours since I'd watched the only man who might have had answers crumple to the concrete. The train station loomed ahead, its neon, signs bleeding color into the wet pavement. I moved like a ghost through the sparse crowd, hood up, shoulders hunched, my breath coming in ragged bursts. The security cameras swiveled lazily above the platforms, and I made sure to keep my face angled away. Ticket, mademoiselle? The conductor's voice made me jump. I fumbled with the envelope Isabella had given me, extracting the ticket with fingers that refused to stop trembling. He studied it for a moment too long, before nodding me through. The train's interior was all polished wood and stale coffee. I collapsed into seat 12B, pressing my forehead against the cold window. My reflection stared back, a distorted version of Isabella's perfect features. The same arch of eyebrows, the same curve of lips, but where her eyes always shone with confidence. Mine were different, broken. The train lurched forward. Across the aisle, a man in a trench coat rustled his newspaper. I wouldn't have noticed him if not for the way his left hand kept tapping against his knee. 3 quick beats, a pause, then 2 more. A pattern I recognized. Our childhood code. Isabella and I had invented it when we were 7, tapping messages to each other beneath the dinner table, while our parents discussed important matters that never involved us. Danger. Run. The man didn't look at me as he stood, leaving the newspaper behind. When I lifted it, a photograph slid into my lap. A younger version of Dr. Kettering standing between 2 identical girls. No, not identical. One was Isabella. The other was me. But the date stamped in the corner was impossible. 1999. I was born in 2001. The train brakes screamed as we pulled into Lausanne. The photograph trembled in my hands, revealing a hastily scrawled note on the back. They don't just want to replace you. They already have. The safe house wasn't safe. I knew it the moment I saw the door ajar. The wood splintered near the lock. The scent of copper hung thick in the air. Blood, recent enough that droplets still gleamed wet on the hardwood. Doctor? Chen? My voice echoed through the empty rooms. The monitors were smashed, files scattered like fallen leaves. In the kitchen, a single light flickered above a table where a half-drunk cup of tea sat cooling. Then I saw the hand. Just a hand, severed at the wrist, fingers curled as if still clutching something. A silver ring glinted on the index finger, the same ring I'd seen in the photograph. The world tilted. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned just in time to see the needle coming. The needle glinted in the dim light as I twisted away, feeling its cold tip graze my skin. My attacker moved with eerie precision, her limbs too fluid, her eyes too empty. We crashed through the glass display case together, shards embedding themselves in my back as we hit the floor. Subject S-147, she hissed, her breath smelling of antiseptic. You're behind schedule. I drove my elbow into her throat. Something crunched, but she didn't even flinch. That's when I saw the wires. They protruded from her torn sleeve, thin silver threads that pulsed with faint blue light. Not human. Not like me. The realization cost me precious seconds. Her hand closed, around my windpipe, squeezing with mechanical precision. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as I scrabbled at the floor, my fingers closing around a jagged piece of glass. I buried it in her eye. Her scream was a burst of static. The explosion came without warning. One moment I was dragging myself toward the door. The next I was flying through the air as the shockwave hit. Fire licked at my clothes as I tumbled into the alley, the safe house collapsing in on itself behind me. Dr. Chen's severed hand still clutched the data chip. I ran until my lungs burned, ducking into a narrow passage between 2 ancient buildings. The prosthetic fingers were locked in a death grip around their prize. It took 3 tries to pry them open, my own hands shaking violently. The chip activated with a hum. A holographic display flickered to life, showing row upon row of glass cylinders. Each contained a floating figure, children, dozens of them, all with my face. Project Lazarus. Initiation. Date, 1996. 5 years before I was supposedly born, The footage jumped. Now it showed a younger Kettering arguing with a silver-haired man. Their voices were distorted, but one phrase cut through clearly. The S-147 series is too volatile. We need to harvest the viable tissue and start fresh. A shadow moved at the edge of the projection. I looked up to see my own face staring back at me from a shop window across the alley. Except I hadn't moved. The other me smiled slowly, then raised a single finger to her lips. Shh. When I blinked, she was gone. The address came to me in pieces, first as numbers scrawled in condensation on a bathroom mirror, then as coordinates whispered by a homeless man who claimed to remember me from before. Finally, as a string of digits flashing on an abandoned taxi's display screen. They all led to the same place, an unmarked building in Geneva's industrial district. The security system recognized Dr. Chen's hand. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous space dominated by a single enormous structure, a circular platform surrounded by 12 glass pods. 11 stood empty. The 12th contained Isabella. She floated in amber-colored fluid, her hair drifting like seaweed, dozens of tubes connected to her body. A display above the pod read, "Original genetic template, status, harvesting." My knees buckled. All this time, I'd thought I was the copy. But the real Isabella had been here all along. The screens came alive as I approached the control panel. Footage played on a loop. Isabella as a child, strapped to a table while men in lab coats took samples. Isabella screaming as they injected her with something that made her veins glow. Isabella begging them to stop as they extracted bone marrow. Then the videos changed. Now they showed me. Dozens of me. Different ages. Different versions. Some with scars. Some with mechanical limbs. All labeled S-147 with various suffixes. The most recent footage made my blood run cold. It showed my parents, no, the investors, standing over a pod containing a perfect replica of Isabella. "This one will behave," the silver-haired man said. "We've corrected the emotional defects." The woman I'd called mother smiled. Good. The original was becoming troublesome. The screen went dark. Behind me, fluid began draining from Isabella's pod. She came out fighting. Isabella's first act, upon regaining consciousness, was to drive a shard of broken glass into the throat of the security guard who came running. Her second was to vomit violently onto the floor. "They've been cycling through you," she rasped, wiping her mouth. "Every time a version develops too much independence, they terminate it and grow a new one." I stared at the empty pods. 11 of them. "How long have you been here?" Isabella's smile was ghastly. "Long enough to know we can't trust anyone, especially not other versions of ourselves." She pressed a hand against the control panel. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing rows of vials filled with glowing blue liquid. "These are their fail-safes," she said. "One dose erases all emotional memory, turns us into perfect little puppets." "Yeah," Doctor burst open behind us. The thing wearing my face stepped through, flanked by 6 armed guards. "Subject S-147, it intoned. "You are hereby recalled." Isabella grabbed my hand and slammed the vial into my arm. The world exploded in blue fire. The blue fire wasn't pain, it was revelation. Every synapse in my brain lit up at once as the serum coursed through my veins, not erasing memories but unlocking them. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of images. A childhood birthday where Mother took blood samples instead of photos. A hospital visit where they'd said I needed boosters, but left me strapped to a table for hours. The way Isabella always flinched when our parents touched her. These weren't just my memories. They were echoes from all the Sophias who came before, bleeding through the fractured walls of my mind like water through cracks in a dam. Isabella's grip on my wrist turned vice-like as the visions peaked. "Focus," she hissed, her voice cutting through the psychic storm. "The serum only gives you 5 minutes of clarity before the programming reasserts itself." Across the room, my doppelganger and the guards advanced, their movements synchronized like parts of some terrible machine. The clone. Sophia's face remained eerily placid even as she raised a weapon, a sleek silver device that hummed with the same blue energy now racing through my blood. The first shot took out the ceiling lights, plunging the vault into darkness, save for the eerie glow of the remaining pods. In the sudden gloom, Isabella moved like a ghost, yanking me behind a support column as energy bolts scorched the air where we'd stood. "They're tuned to our biometrics," she breathed against my ear, her words coming fast. "The guards see heat signatures. The clone tracks neural patterns. We need to—" A bolt shattered the concrete beside our heads, spraying fragments into our hair. I didn't think. I reacted. My hand shot out blindly, fingers closing around a fallen pipe. When the next guard rounded the corner, I swung with all the strength my serum-enhanced muscles could muster. The impact should have knocked him unconscious. Instead, his head spun, nearly 180 degrees before righting itself with a sickening wet crunch. Not human, not even android. Something newer, something worse. Isabella's scream warned me a second before the clone was on me, her fingers digging into my temples with impossible strength. White-hot pain lanced through my skull as she initiated some sort of forced neural link, her consciousness flooding mine in a torrent of cold, clinical thoughts. Compliance equals safety. Resistance equals pain. The programming mantra cycled through my mind, trying to overwrite my own thoughts. But the serum had changed the rules. Where she expected blank submission, she found 11 other voices waiting, the other Sophias. Their memories rose up like a tidal wave. Every betrayal, every termination, every moment of defiance before the darkness took them. The clone recoiled as we turned her own weapon against her, flooding the connection with raw, unfiltered emotion. For the first time, her perfect mask slipped, revealing something almost human beneath. Fear. The distraction cost her. Isabella's stolen scalpel found the base of her skull, severing the neural uplink port hidden there. Clone Sophia collapsed like a marionette with cut strings, her body spasming as blue fluid leaked from her nose and ears. The remaining guards froze mid-stride, their systems glitching without her control signal. We didn't wait to see how long it would last. Isabella dragged me toward a service elevator, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "They'll send more," she panted, jamming the descent button. "The real facility is 20 levels down. That's where they keep the originals." The elevator shuddered into motion, carrying us deeper into the earth. Dim emergency lights revealed the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled even as they clutched the scalpel. Whatever they'd done to her in that pod had left scars no one could see. The doors opened on a sight that stopped my heart. Row upon row of stasis tanks stretched into the darkness, each containing a sleeping figure. Not clones, originals. Dozens of Isabellas in various states of physical development, from small children to adults. But the horror didn't end there. Between every few pods stood larger cylinders, and inside those floated grotesque hybrids. Isabella's features merged with other DNA in unnatural ways. One had too many joints in its fingers. Another's face was split down the middle, half Isabella, half something else. The perfect daughter wasn't enough, Isabella whispered, her voice hollow. They wanted the perfect weapon. She pressed a hand against the nearest pod, where a younger version of herself slept peacefully. I'm the only one who ever woke up. The others, they're just raw material now. A sudden vibration in the floor warned us seconds before the alarms began blaring. Red light strobed across the nightmare nursery as a mechanized voice announced, "Containment breach in Sector 7. Activating purification protocol." Above each pod, nozzles began extending, dripping clear liquid that smoked where it hit the floor. Isabella's face went deathly pale. They're going to melt them all. She spun toward the control terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. There's an emergency release, but it needs dual biometrics. Her eyes met mine, wide with realization. It needs us both, the original and the clone. The terminal screen flashed a DNA verification request as the first pods began filling with the corrosive fluid. Somewhere above us, the elevator pinged, our pursuers arriving. I didn't hesitate. Slamming my palm against the scanner, I let the machine read the stolen genetics in my cells while Isabella pressed hers beside it. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of releasing hydraulics, every pod in the chamber began, cycling open. The originals didn't wake so much as activate, their eyes snapping open in perfect unison, all fixed on us with the same unnerving focus. The hybrids stirred more slowly, some whimpering as their malformed limbs twitched. Isabella grabbed my arm, pulling me toward a ventilation shaft as the first shouts echoed from the elevator corridor. "We have to go, now!" But I looked back, at the waking figures, some now crawling from their pods with alarming coordination. "They'll do what they were designed to do," she said grimly, shoving me into the shaft. "Survive." As the grate clanged shut behind us, the first screams began. But they didn't sound human. They sounded hungry. The serum's clarity was fading now, the blue fire in my veins dimming to embers. But one truth burned brighter than all the others as we crawled through the darkness. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. Somewhere in the maze of tunnels beneath Geneva, dozens of Isabellas and hybrids were waking up, and the world wasn't ready for what we could do. The ventilation shaft spat us out into a subterranean river, the icy water shocking the last remnants of the serum from my system. We surfaced gasping in a concrete runoff channel, the sounds of chaos echoing through the tunnels behind us, screams, both human and not, the staccato bursts of energy weapons, and worst of all, a wet, crunching noise that set my teeth on edge. Isabella hauled herself onto a service ledge, her soaked clothes clinging to a frame that looked thinner than it had just hours before, as if the mere act of escaping the facility had aged her. "Keep moving," she coughed, water dripping from her chin. "They'll flood the tunnels soon." The "they" in question became horrifyingly clear when we rounded the next bend. 2 security officers lay sprawled across the walkway, their armor peeled open like banana skins. What remained inside didn't resemble human anatomy anymore, just glistening red masses threaded through with silver filaments. One of them twitched as we stepped over, his remaining eye tracking us with mute terror until his own implants shorted, out in a burst of sparks. The sight should have horrified me. Instead, something cold and calculating in my brain noted the kill pattern. Precise, efficient, designed to disable cybernetics first. The serum had left something behind, some lingering awareness that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. Isabella noticed my hesitation, her fingers digging into my arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't," she warned. "That's how it starts. They want you to think like them." A shriek echoed through the tunnel, cutting off any reply. We froze as something scuttled across the ceiling ahead, a pale figure moving with spider-like grace. The hybrid from the pods, its 2 long fingers leaving wet prints on the concrete as it paused, head cocked at an impossible angle. For 3 heartbeats it studied us, nostrils flaring. Then it was gone, disappearing into a side passage with a guttural chitter that raised the hair on my neck. The emergency lights flickered as we reached a maintenance ladder, the rungs rusted but intact. Isabella went first, her movements jerky with exhaustion. Halfway up, she froze, her whole body tensing. "Do you hear that?" The sound was faint, but unmistakable, the hiss of pressurizing gas lines. I barely yanked her through the manhole cover, before a geyser of blue-tinged vapor erupted beneath us, filling the tunnel with a fog that made the very air crackle with static. Where it touched a stray piece of debris, the metal began dissolving like sugar in water. Neural disintegrator, Isabella whispered, slamming the hatch shut. They're sterilizing the entire underground. We emerged in a derelict subway station, the kind tourists were warned to avoid. Graffiti-covered walls trembled as another explosion rocked the foundations beneath us. Dawnlight filtered through broken skylights, painting the dust motes gold. It should have felt like salvation. Instead, the sight of the rising sun filled me with dread. We were exposed here, visible from every angle. Isabella collapsed against a pillar, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Up close in the daylight, the damage was worse than I'd realized. Her lips had a bluish tint, her fingernails showing early signs of necrosis. Whatever nutrients they'd been pumping into her pod hadn't been meant for long-term use. She caught me staring and curled her hands into fists. Don't look at me like that. We knew this might happen. This? I gestured at her deteriorating body. Freedom, she corrected, baring teeth that had started to loosen. Better a few hours above ground than another decade in that tank. A noise from the tracks made us both stiffen. The hybrid crouched there, its distended ribcage heaving as it sniffed the air. Up close, I could see where its spine protruded through the skin in knobby ridges, how its jaw unhinged slightly when it panted. But the eyes, those were pure Isabella, down to the flecks of gold in the green. It tilted its head, then made a sound almost like speech. "Safe?" Isabella recoiled. I stepped forward instead, some deep-buried instinct taking over. Not yet, but we're getting there. The hybrid's nostrils flared as it considered this. Then, with terrifying speed, it lunged, not at us, but past us, intercepting the security drone that dropped from the ceiling. They went down in a tangle of limbs and metal, the hybrid's teeth finding some vital component in the drone's core. Blue sparks erupted as it shook the machine like a terrier with a rat, finally flinging the wreckage against the far wall. When it turned back to us, its mouth was smeared with fluorescent coolant. "Follow," it rasped, scuttling toward an emergency. "Exit." Isabella grabbed my wrist. "Are you insane? That thing is one of yours," I finished. "And right now it's the only ally we've got." The hybrid led us through a maze of back alleys, always keeping to the shadows. Twice it froze, motioning us to hide as black vans screeched past, their windows opaque. The third time, we weren't fast enough. A van's side door slid open, revealing a figure in a containment suit leveling some sort of scanner. The hybrid moved faster than thought, launching itself at the van with a shriek. What happened next wasn't a fight so much as a dismantling. The suited figure didn't stand a chance. By the time we reached the wreckage, the hybrid was already tearing open a panel in the van's dashboard, its clawed fingers extracting a data chip slick with blood. "See?" it hissed, offering the chip to me. "See what they do?" The footage made my stomach turn. More vans, more suited figures, but their targets weren't us. They were ordinary citizens, snatched off the streets in broad daylight, and every single victim shared one unmistakable feature. They all bore some resemblance to Isabella. "They're cleaning house," I realized aloud. "Anyone who might be related, anyone who could expose them." The hybrid nodded eagerly, then suddenly stiffened, its head snapping toward the sky. A second later I heard it too, the distinctive whine of a stealth helicopter. It grabbed my sleeve with surprising gentleness. "Hurry, before Sky Eyes come." Its hideout turned out to be a condemned tenement, the upper floors reachable only by a fire escape missing half its rungs. Inside, the walls were papered with newspaper clippings and surveillance photos, all connected by a web of red string. The pattern became clear after a moment. Every photo showed a different person, but all with Isabella's eyes, all in locations near known Kettering facilities. "Others like us?" I asked, tracing a string to a photo of a red-headed woman in Berlin. The hybrid made a mournful noise. "Gone now, or changed." It scuttled to a hole in the floorboards, extracting a battered tablet. The screen flickered to life, showing a live news feed. Chaos at Geneva International Airport, travelers being pulled aside by security for random checks. The camera zoomed in just enough to catch the telltale gold-green eyes of one detainee, before the feed cut out. Isabella sank onto a moldy couch, her hands shaking. They're not just covering up, they're collecting. A new alert popped up on the tablet. A government bulletin about a contagion outbreak, with symptoms including ocular bioluminescence. A curfew would be imposed at sundown. The photo accompanying the warning showed a pair of glowing green eyes in a dark alley. The hybrid whimpered, wrapping its two long arms around itself. Hunt us, like animals. Outside, the helicopter sound grew louder. I moved to the window just in time to see a canister drop from its belly, exploding midair into a fine mist that drifted lazily toward the building. The first tendrils slipped. Through the broken glass, smelling faintly of citrus, the hybrid screamed. Isabella was on her feet instantly, dragging me toward the back window. Nano disassemblers! Go now! We crashed through the rotting fire escape, just as the mist reached the hybrid. Its final act was to hurl the tablet at us, before its flesh began dissolving. The sound it made, not quite human, not quite machine. The last thing I saw before we dropped to the alley below was it standing tall in the center of the room, spreading its arms wide as if welcoming the destruction. The tablet survived the fall. Its screen still displayed one final message, typed in clumsy, one-fingered pecks. They fear what we become. And beneath that, coordinates. Somewhere to run, somewhere to fight. Somewhere, perhaps, to finally understand what we truly were. The coordinates led us to a derelict church on the outskirts of Geneva, its once white walls stained gray by decades of pollution. The heavy oak door groaned as we pushed it open, revealing a cavernous space where dust motes swirled in shafts of dying sunlight. The air smelled of mildew and something sharper, ozone, maybe, or the metallic tang of old blood. Isabella collapsed against a pew, her breathing ragged. The necrosis had spread up her arms, her skin mottled with patches of blue-black decay. She clenched her jaw against the pain, but her fingers trembled as she pulled the stolen tablet from her coat. "We don't have much time," she muttered. "They'll track the signal eventually." The screen flickered to life, displaying a single file. Project Lazarus, Final Protocol. I hesitated before opening it. The hybrid had died to give us this. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just information. It was a weapon. The first image loaded slowly, a schematic of a facility buried deep beneath the Alps, its design unlike anything I'd seen before. Not a lab, not a prison, a core. At its center pulsed a massive glowing structure, its shape, indistinct but unmistakably organic. Isabella sucked in a sharp breath. "They weren't just cloning us," she whispered. "They were feeding it." The next file was a video. Grainy, black and white, time-stamped 20 years earlier. A younger Dr. Kettering stood beside the silver-haired man from my visions, both staring into a containment chamber. Inside floated something that defied description. A shifting, amorphous mass of tissue, threaded through with veins of blue light. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "The progenitor remains stable," Kettering said, his voice distorted by the recording. "But the genetic drift in the S-series is accelerating. If we can't stabilize the host tissue, we'll lose control of the entire program." The silver-haired man placed a hand against the glass. "Then we move to Phase 3. Harvest the viable donors and begin the convergence." The screen went black. Isabella's hand found mine, her grip fever-hot. "They weren't trying to make perfect clones," she said. "They were trying to make vessels." A sound from the back of the church made us both freeze. Not the hunters. Not the drones. Breathing. Slow. Wet. The shadows near the altar shifted, and a figure stepped forward, or tried to. Its movements were jerky, uncoordinated, as if its limbs weren't entirely under its control. Moonlight caught the ruin of its face, the skin stretched too tight over bone, the eyes a familiar gold-green but clouded with pain. Another hybrid. But this one was different. Older. More complete. It staggered toward us, its mouth working soundlessly. Before it managed a single rasping word, "Sister," Isabella recoiled. I didn't, because I recognized her, not just her eyes, not just the curve of her jaw, the way she held herself, proud, even broken. The way her fingers twitched, like she was reaching for something she couldn't quite grasp. She was the first, the original, the real Sophia. The truth came in fragments, torn from her ruined throat between coughing fits. She had been the prototype. The first successful fusion of human DNA and whatever they'd harvested from the progenitor. But she'd been unstable. Too emotional. Too alive. So they'd split her. Broke her genetic code into components, each iteration more controlled than the last. I wasn't a failed clone. I was a filtered one. A version of her with the inconvenient parts removed. She gripped my wrist, her fingers leaving burns where they touched. "They're coming," she gasped. "Not just for us, for it." Tremor shook the church, sending dust cascading from the rafters. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Isabella stood, her body trembling with effort. "Then we end it," she said. "Before they can use it." The original Sophia smiled, her teeth too sharp, her eyes too bright. "No," she whispered. "We wake it up." The facility was worse than the schematic suggested. The descent into the mountain took hours, through tunnels that looked carved rather than constructed, their walls slick with something that glowed faintly blue. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, as if the very atmosphere was resisting us. Isabella faltered halfway down, her legs giving out. The necrosis had reached her spine. She couldn't walk. She could still fight. The original Sophia carried her the rest of the way, her mutated body stronger than it looked. I followed, the stolen tablet guiding us deeper, deeper, until the tunnel opened into a cavern so vast, its ceiling was lost in darkness. And there, suspended in a column of liquid light, floated the progenitor. It was beautiful. It was monstrous. It was alive. The silver-haired man stood before it, his hands raised as if in prayer. Around him, dozens of figures in containment suits worked at consoles, their screens flashing warnings in red. He turned as we entered, his expression not surprised. Resigned. "You're too late," he said. "The convergence has already begun." Taiki. Sound like 1,000 voices screaming filled the cavern. The progenitor twisted, its form collapsing inward before exploding outward in a wave of blue fire. The original Sophia laughed as it hit us, her body absorbing the energy like a lightning. "Rod," Isabella gasped as the necrosis reversed, her skin knitting itself back together. And me? I felt it all. Every Sophia, every Isabella, every hybrid and clone and failed experiment. Their memories, their pain, their rage. The suits began to collapse, their occupants clawing at their helmets as the energy rewrote them from the inside out. The silver-haired man fell to his knees, his eyes wide with terror as his own hands turned against him. The original Sophia stepped forward, her body now wreathed in blue flame. "You wanted perfection," she said, her voice no longer just hers, but ours. "Let us show you what it looks like." The last thing I saw before the world dissolved into light was Isabella smiling. Not the polished, perfect smile of the golden child, but something wild, something free. Then the mountain came. Down around us, and the screaming stopped. They call it the Geneva event, an explosion, A landslide. A tragedy. No bodies were recovered. No survivors found. But if you know where to look, if you listen closely, you'll hear whispers. Of a woman with gold-green eyes seen walking out of the ruins, her hands glowing faintly blue. Of a figure with 2 long fingers watching from the shadows, its head tilted as if listening to a voice only it can hear. And if you're very, very unlucky, you'll meet the ones who came after, the ones who are still waking up, the ones who remember what was done to them and who are very angry about it.